Modern attraction is a paradox that most men fail to grasp. The irony is brutal: the moment you stop wanting her, she starts wanting you. When you become indifferent, she becomes obsessed. When you are unavailable, she is intrigued. And when you genuinely do not care whether she stays or leaves, that is when her desire intensifies. This isn't a manipulation tactic, it is psychology. Women are drawn to power, not need. A man who doesn't seek validation, who carries himself as if his life is already full, signals something rare: self-sufficiency. That self-sufficiency is magnetic. In a world where most men grovel for attention, showing that you are whole on your own sends an undeniable message: you are not here to beg for entry into her life, you are inviting her into yours on your terms. Confidence like this awakens desire in ways words cannot. It terrifies her ego because it disrupts the familiar pattern, the predictable rhythm she is used to. She is accustomed to men bending, adjusting, and softening themselves for approval. When she meets someone who is unshakable, someone whose energy is centered and whose presence is independent of her validation, it throws her off balance. She begins to wonder what kind of life you live that makes her irrelevant to your happiness. That disorientation awakens curiosity, and curiosity awakens attraction. The harder a man is to figure out, the deeper her mind lingers on him. The more unpredictable he is, the more she invests emotionally without even realizing it. This is the paradox of attraction: the less you seek, the more she desires. When a man stands firmly in his own value, he does not chase, he is magnetic. His calmness, self-containment, and lack of need create a tension that she cannot resist, and in that tension, her fascination grows, often before she even understands why. Women don't chase comfort, they chase emotion. They want to feel something rare, something that challenges them, something that requires effort and attention. When a man offers himself too easily, when he seeks validation and approval at every turn, he gives away his value before it is earned. Comfort is predictable, and predictability kills tension. Tension is the soil where attraction grows. Emotional scarcity, on the other hand, creates intrigue. When a man doesn't over-communicate, when he doesn't pour affection indiscriminately, when he carries himself as though his time and attention are precious, he naturally increases his value in her mind. She begins to wonder why he is different, why he doesn't behave like the men she's accustomed to. That uncertainty triggers investment, because humans, women included, are wired to fill in gaps, to solve puzzles, to chase challenges. The more she feels she has to earn a man's attention, respect, or recognition, the more emotionally attached she becomes. This attachment isn't about logic, it is instinctive. Her mind loops endlessly, asking questions she doesn't even fully realize she is asking. Why doesn't he pursue me? What does he think about me? Who else has his attention? That curiosity, that need to understand and decode him, turns into obsession. When men chase, they remove tension, they remove the puzzle. They give away the game too easily. But when a man is self-contained, emotionally disciplined, and independent, he introduces scarcity without effort. That scarcity forces her to invest herself emotionally, to care more deeply than she would if everything were handed to her. She begins to attach significance to moments, gestures, and words that would otherwise pass unnoticed. The reality is that value is not assigned by what is given freely, but by what must be earned. Scarcity is magnetic, and the less a man needs her, the more she unconsciously needs him. When a man refuses to chase or bend to a woman's emotional expectations, he becomes a mirror, reflecting her own patterns back at her. She begins to notice herself in ways she didn't before, often unconsciously. The strategies she once relied upon, subtle flirtation, emotional manipulation, creating tension, testing boundaries, lose their effect. This failure is confusing because she is used to being able to influence outcomes with her charm or the drama she orchestrates. When she realizes her usual tactics do not move him, it unsettles her. Detachment forces self-reflection, whether she wants it or not. Her mind starts to analyze every interaction, looking for clues in his behavior, trying to decode what she cannot influence. That curiosity grows into fascination, and fascination often morphs into desire. The man who remains calm, unbothered, and emotionally steady stands in contrast to the chaos she's accustomed to. Every man who reacts to her moods reinforces her expectations, he challenges them simply by refusing to react. She begins to question herself, Why doesn't he respond the way others do? What makes him different? That difference is magnetic, because mystery has its own power. By staying composed, by holding frame and remaining independent of her emotional games, a man forces her to see her own patterns more clearly. She becomes invested not because of what he says or does, but because of what he doesn't do. He doesn't bend, he doesn't chase, he doesn't over-explain. His silence, his stillness, and his self-possession create tension that she instinctively wants to resolve. She starts projecting onto him, imagining depth where there may simply be calm, attributing motives to him that reflect her own desires and fears. In this way, detachment becomes a mirror and mystery becomes magnetic, compelling her attention without a single effort on his part. He doesn't chase, she chases herself, through the puzzle he has created simply by being grounded. A man who is fully engaged with his purpose and mission carries an energy that women instinctively notice. His focus is not on seeking approval, attention, or validation, it is on building, creating, and living according to his own values. That independence is magnetic because it is rare. Most men adjust their behavior to gain favor or acceptance, bending themselves for approval, softening boundaries, and compromising priorities for attention. But a man who is fully invested in his purpose doesn't waver. He doesn't bend. He doesn't chase. His life moves forward whether she participates or not. This self-contained energy awakens curiosity because it signals something she cannot control. Women are drawn to challenges, to the unknown, to the tension that comes from wanting what they cannot command. The more a man's focus is rooted in something larger than desire, the more irresistible he becomes, not through words or charm, but through presence. She begins to observe him more closely, how he interacts with others, how he carries himself, how he reacts under pressure. Each subtle action reinforces the fact that he is unshakable. That consistency and autonomy create attraction on a primal level because they suggest leadership, stability, and strength. It is not arrogance or coldness, it is mastery of self. When she senses that he is guided by mission and purpose rather than by emotion or external validation, it disrupts her expectations. She begins to adapt her own behavior, often unconsciously, testing boundaries, seeking signs of attention, trying to measure his interest. The harder it is to capture him, the more she invests emotionally. She begins to compete for his attention not because she wants to dominate, but because his presence presents a standard, a benchmark of self-possession that compels her to elevate herself. This is the subtle but undeniable power of a man who prioritizes purpose over pursuit. His independence doesn't push her away, it pulls her in, Maki. Attraction doesn't grow in comfort, it grows in tension. When a man remains calm, composed, and self-contained, he creates a magnetic force that women can't help but notice. Men who chase, who over-communicate, who shower attention and affection without boundaries, remove tension. They create predictability, and predictability dulls desire. But the man who stands firm, who maintains his composure regardless of her emotional fluctuations, introduces a subtle challenge. This challenge, though simple in action, is powerful in effect. She begins to wonder why he is different, why he doesn't react the way other men do. That uncertainty, that inability to fully grasp or control him, sparks her curiosity. Curiosity, in turn, fuels emotional investment. The more she feels she has to earn his attention, respect, and time, the deeper her subconscious attachment grows. It is instinctive, the human mind craves what is scarce. Every interaction with a man who doesn't chase becomes a puzzle to solve. She analyzes his words, his gestures, his silences, trying to decode his intentions. Her imagination fills in gaps, attributing depth and meaning to moments that may have been effortless for him. The irony is that nothing dramatic is required, the attraction grows simply because he is unavailable in the ways that matter. Her mind loops repeatedly, trying to understand what she cannot command. Emotional scarcity, then, becomes magnetic. She doesn't need him to try hard, to beg, or to prove himself. His restraint, his independence, and his self-possession are enough to make her invest herself emotionally. The man who creates tension through calmness, who remains composed and unattainable without effort, shifts the balance of power. He doesn't chase, yet she becomes the one drawn in, pulled by curiosity, fascination, and a desire that emerges naturally from the space he occupies. Scarcity, presence, and self-mastery make him unforgettable. Silence speaks louder than words when it is grounded in clarity and self-possession. Real detachment is not coldness or indifference, it is the quiet understanding that your value and your peace are not contingent on another person's approval. When a man embodies this, he communicates more through stillness than most men ever can with flattery or grand gestures. His lack of reaction to emotional manipulation, to testing, or to attempts at provocation becomes a mirror for her own behavior. She begins to notice patterns she previously ignored, not because he points them out, but because his calm exposes them effortlessly. This form of detachment unsettles her because it defies the expectations she has learned from past experiences. She is used to men responding, reacting, bending, and compromising in ways that reassure her of their attention and affection. But when she encounters someone whose composure is unwavering, her mind is forced to work in ways it hasn't before. Curiosity replaces certainty, fascination replaces control, and tension replaces comfort. She starts to observe more, to think more, to question her assumptions. His silence becomes an anchor that shifts the dynamic entirely. It creates a space in which she is compelled to reflect, to consider her own need for control and validation. She cannot manipulate him, she cannot predict him, and she cannot fully possess him. And in that inability, she feels something rare: respect, awe, and, ultimately, desire. This is the power of stillness. It demonstrates mastery without the need to prove, it commands attention without demanding it, and it teaches lessons without speaking a single word. A man who understands this lives in his own center, and in doing so, he becomes a standard she unconsciously measures every other connection against. His presence communicates gravity, stability, and self-possession, the kind of qualities that are remembered long after words have faded. The paradox of attraction lies in emotional contrast. A man who is unwavering in his calmness and self-possession forces a woman to experience emotions she isn't accustomed to. She has spent her life around men who overreact, who chase, who bend to her moods and whims, but he moves differently. He does not mirror her chaos, he does not fuel her emotional theater. Instead, he remains rooted in purpose, self-control, and inner peace. That difference unsettles her at first, because it disrupts her expectations. She begins to notice that her usual strategies, testing boundaries, creating drama, seeking reassurance, hold no power over him. The lack of control she experiences creates tension, and tension ignites curiosity. She starts observing him in subtle ways, the way he interacts with others, the way he holds himself, the way his energy remains unshaken regardless of circumstance. Every moment she spends analyzing him deepens her investment, not because he is trying to impress, but because he is simply being himself. That authenticity, combined with emotional stability, sets a standard she unconsciously measures all other men against. She begins to project meaning onto his calm, imagining depth and intention where perhaps there is only self-possession. But it is precisely this projection that intensifies attraction. By refusing to chase, by maintaining boundaries, and by prioritizing his own growth, he introduces a challenge she cannot easily resolve. She starts to wonder why he does not react like others do, why he cannot be captured or controlled, and that curiosity morphs into emotional attachment. The more she invests herself trying to understand him, the stronger her desire grows. She chases not him, but the emotional experience he represents, stability, autonomy, and the rare combination of strength without need. In contrast to men who over-explain or overcompensate, he becomes unforgettable simply by standing still, grounded in his own value, inviting her to measure herself against a man who has mastered himself. Independence is magnetic because it creates emotional scarcity, the kind that women instinctively chase. A man who prioritizes his own life, purpose, and growth signals that his energy is limited and valuable. He is not constantly available, not constantly validating, not constantly performing to meet expectations, and that absence makes every moment of his attention more meaningful. She begins to notice subtleties, the calm way he handles himself, the unshakable steadiness in his demeanor, the lack of desperation in his actions. These qualities draw her in more powerfully than words ever could because they communicate something primal. He is not dependent on her for his identity or happiness. In contrast, most men reveal their neediness through overcommunication, excessive reassurance, and overinvestment in approval. That availability removes tension, removes challenge, and removes intrigue. But when a man does not seek to be understood or constantly validated, he introduces a rare kind of emotional gravity. She starts to wonder about the life he leads that makes her unnecessary to his completeness. That curiosity sparks fascination, and fascination fuels attachment. She projects meaning onto his calm, attributing depth, intention, and emotion where perhaps there is simply discipline and self-possession. Each gesture, each silence, each boundary becomes a puzzle she wants to solve. Emotional scarcity creates investment without effort because the human mind, wired for challenge, fills the gaps with thought and desire. Her attempts to capture him or provoke a response fail, and in that failure, she becomes more invested. His independence does not push her away, it pulls her in, because she is drawn to the stability, strength, and clarity that she cannot command or manufacture. He stands still, yet she moves, chasing a presence that cannot be fully possessed, creating a tension that transforms curiosity into desire, and desire into fascination that lingers long after interactions end. The final lesson in understanding attraction is rooted in self-mastery and presence. A man who has cultivated his own life, his own purpose, and his own inner peace becomes magnetic not because he chases, but because he doesn't need to. Women notice the difference between those who are driven by desire and those who are grounded in self-possession. When a man is emotionally complete without needing her validation, he shifts the dynamic entirely. She begins to measure herself against his composure, his calm, and his unwavering focus. His absence is not a void to fill, but a standard to aspire to, and she cannot ignore it. Over time, she recognizes that the men who were eager, attentive, and available were ultimately predictable, their affection easy to obtain and therefore less valuable. In contrast, he represents something rare, a combination of strength, emotional stability, and independence that cannot be bought or coerced. She becomes drawn to that presence not because he makes her feel desired in the conventional sense, but because he shows what it feels like to be respected, understood, and met with unwavering calm. His stillness becomes a silent teacher, revealing her own patterns, insecurities, and emotional reliance. She learns to differentiate between chaos and stability, intensity and depth, validation and true resonance. By refusing to bend for approval, by maintaining his boundaries and protecting his energy, he becomes unforgettable. His legacy in her mind is not rooted in fleeting passion or dramatic gestures, but in the quiet gravity of a man who walked his own path and allowed her to witness it without manipulation. She may never fully articulate it, and she may never return, but she carries the memory of him as a reference point, a benchmark of emotional maturity, authenticity, and real strength. Through his presence and restraint, he teaches her the most profound lesson, that attraction, respect, and desire are drawn to mastery, not need.